This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacey Yarborough. I am the Town of North Haven Town Clerk as well as Tax Collector. As you all are aware, we're present this evening for our annual town budget public hearing. This is for the upcoming grand list for 2022, which starts on October 1st for each year, and is brought pursuant to Section 705 of our Charter and Connecticut General Statute, Section 7-344. So as everyone knows, and it's important that you remember, if you don't know, is that tonight is just a public hearing. There will be no voting, just chatting. We'll be hearing introductions and explanations of the proposed budgets of the Board of Education first, and that will be our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Stirk. And then after Mr. Stirk is concluded, then we'll hear on the town government side, and that will be our first time with Mr. Mike Frida. And then we'll obviously open it up for comments, discussion, and questions. But a little background. I always like to give information about the history of budget making and to point out that our town is special because we are a first selectman, board of selectmen, town meeting form of government, which means every single elector in our town has the power to get involved and vote. And that's wonderful because a lot of towns in Connecticut and throughout our nation don't have it anymore. It's not a direct democracy like we have. So with regard to the history of the budget and how it's made, approximately November, December of every year, budgets are being made by each of the department heads. And they submit those to the Board of Finance. Workshops then begin in the new year with the department heads for them to be able to present their budgets. Eventually, a preliminary budget is created, and then we have an idea as to the three very important parts of the budget. The idea that we need to find out what the grand levy is, the grand list will be, and what the mill rate will eventually be as well. Tonight's public hearing is, as I told you, that there will be the presentation individually of the Board of Education's budget, as well as the proposed budget, as well as the town government proposed budget, and there will be no voting. The next step for our budget process is the town budget meeting, and that takes place next month, Monday, May 8th, 2023, and that will be here at the high school. Lastly, the actual vote of the budget is referred to referendum, and that will take place on May 16th, 2023, from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., and everyone will go to the Mildred Wigley Recreation Center on Lindsley Street to vote for the budget. And there's one question, and it's a yes or no question on the ballot. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over the proceedings to the Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Stirk, as I know that he's going to now present the Board of Education's proposed budget.
Good evening. Good evening, North Haven community members. Tonight I will be presenting the Board of Education's budget recommendation for the 2023-2024 school year. There is little change to the overall budget at all levels and within all departments. The far majority of increases is a result of contractual obligations and cost of benefits. Within this year's budget, there's a proposal to retain 4 full-time positions and add an interventionist position that was in place prior to the pandemic. There's also a few additions to the athletic department that I will elaborate further on in the presentation. So the budgeting process is one of the most important tasks the district and the Board of Education take on to reach the objectives within our mission statement. The NHPS mission statement is as follows. It is the mission of the North Haven Public Schools in collaboration with students, parents, and community to develop responsible, educated, and productive global citizens who can thrive in an ever-changing world. The vision of the graduate is the foundation for this budget proposal. The VOG provides direction, priorities, and frames how the district will utilize the allocated funds. In creating this budget recommendation, we are committed to maintaining these priorities. maintain the district's focus on improving achievement and providing extracurricular opportunities for all students, meet all contractual obligations, and utilize the vision of a graduate to drive the budget. The proposed budget recommendation provides the following: resources to educate 3,198 students, mental health, nutrition, and medical care to allow students to access instruction, specialized services required for all students to meet their potential, diverse opportunities for students to engage in activities outside of their curricular pursuits, and transportation to and from school. So North Haven Public Schools continues to excel in academic areas and is providing numerous opportunities and activities to support the whole student. This portion of the presentation will highlight a few areas and achievements, as well as measuring the return on investment on the board and the community's, measuring the return on the board and the community's investment. I apologize. So the District Reference Group, or DIRG, is a method in which Connecticut groups similar school districts. So the grouping takes into account annual household income, students who receive free and reduced lunch, as well as other factors. And this grouping, or DIRG, allows people to compare multiple areas such as performance, expenditures, staffing, etc. So the average per pupil expenditure for our DIRG D, is $19,365. North Haven's per pupil expenditure is $19,184. So North Haven spends $181 less per student per year than this average. So an additional $570,000, which is just 1% shy, which is just shy of 1%, would be needed to meet the average per pupil expenditure for our DIRG. So for comparison purposes, North Haven spends $3,000 above the lowest PPE and is $5,700 from the top spending DIRG. So this chart shows the highest and lowest spending districts within DIRG D. A lot of these in there, I apologize. North Haven ranks 11th of 24 districts, and there is very little overall change in ranking of districts from last year to this year. So the district's achievements reflect a substantial return on investment based on the district's funding comparison. Last school year, North Haven ranked 3rd in the Smarter Balance Assessment for English Language Arts and 6th in the area of math. And North Haven's 5th graders ranked 2nd in DIRG D on the Next Generation Science Standards Assessment. So we are spending below the average in many areas and achieving above average results within our DIRG. Our goal is to maintain and to build upon this success. So the district was able to provide the following to our students: community-based health services at all 6 schools. Initially, these services were solely provided at the middle school and high school. However, the district was able to make these services available to all students at all schools within our district. And although these services are not directly tied to the budget, they require planning and time at the district level. So the Unified Arts offerings were adjusted at the elementary level in order to provide science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM classes, on a weekly basis. The IT department purchased hundreds of ebooks for students to read in school and at home. Lynn McKenna, the district's assistant superintendent, has spent significant time developing a relationship with Goodwin University. This relationship has improved and increased the offerings in the areas of career and tech education, specifically around manufacturing. Not listed in these highlights are the upgrades to the physical and digital security throughout the district. Many of these upgrades go intentionally unseen, and a conscious effort has been made to significantly fortify this infrastructure over the past few years. So the Board of Education's proposed budget for 2023 and 2024. The Board of Education This represents a 2.87% increase from last year's approved budget. This increase would have met all contractual obligations, healthcare benefits, and increases to utilities. It also covered new positions and programs, which will be highlighted later in the presentation. So the Board of Education's initial proposed budget was lowered by $250,000 by the Board of Finance at their March 15th meeting. The adjusted increase for the 23-24 budget year is now $1,477,624, which brought the annual Board of Education budget to $61,643,954. This represents a 2.46% increase from last year's approved budget. So this increase will continue to meet our contractual obligations, healthcare benefits, increases in utilities, and new positions and programs included in the initial proposal. I am very thankful for Mr. Frida's statement at the March 15th Board of Finance meeting. On behalf of the Board of Education and myself, we really appreciate that we will not support any further reductions to the Board of Education budget. So this slide highlights the 5 areas where the budget proposal was reduced. Contingencies were lowered for electric, gas for heating, gas for buses, and this combined for a $100,000 decrease to the budget. Out-of-district student tuition contingency was lowered by $125,000, and the cleaning services contract is currently being negotiated, and we anticipate savings once that contract is settled. Just to reiterate, the reductions were achieved with no impact to students, staffing, or instructional materials, and all proposed positions and programs will remain in this budget proposal. So before moving on to new positions and programs, I want to highlight a very important area that hits a major positive for the district. When Jen Stewart, our Director of Student Services, assumed her position in 2019, we made a conscious effort to lessen the number of students who were placed in a special education out-of-district program. The main reason for this adjustment is that we truly believe that students should be given every opportunity to learn in their home district. In order to move this belief into action, we needed to add resources to our district programs in order to support all of our learners. As a result, we are beginning to see a significant decline in the students who are placed at the out-of-district special education programs. As you can see, in 2019, there are 32 students at this type of placement, and at present, there are 18 students. A secondary benefit to this adjustment is that the district's budget line for tuition has decreased 18.4%. And this decrease has allowed us to offset costs that are out of our control, such as utilities and gas. So for this proposal, to address all the needs of the district and increase services in needed areas, and provide additional extracurricular opportunities for students, and remain at a 2.46% increase is nothing short of miraculous. These types of efforts or offsets have allowed us to keep this request at a reasonable level. This portion of the presentation will highlight additional programs and positions included in this year's proposal. So 2 years ago, the district hired 5 elementary teachers using ESSER III funding. The goal was to lessen the number of students in K-3 classrooms. Our intention was to keep these positions in place for 2 years. But due to an increase in enrollment, we propose to keep these 3 positions in place in order to return class sizes to similar levels similar pre-pandemic levels. A reading interventionist is also requested at the middle school. This position was in place prior to the pandemic and will restore the academic support at the middle school to a pre-pandemic level. So, due to a shortage of certified athletic trainers, one was recently hired to replace the services we received from Quinnipiac Physical Therapy. There's an approximate $15,000 addition to this budget area as compared to 22-23. And for an additional $20,000, the proposal includes a middle school volleyball team, a middle school unified sports program, and an assistant golf coach to assist with supervision. So North Haven is known for its commitment to education and the community support of the Board of Education's annual operating budget. I truly thank you for continuously supporting the students and families of North Haven, and I look forward to our collective work together. Thank you.
Much taller than I am. So at this time, we'll have the second presentation of the night, and that will be our first selectman, Mr. Frieda, and he will come up to give a presentation as to the town government portion of our budget. And then after that, we will start the process of comments and discussions here at the front. I just want to remind everyone, in case things start moving along too quickly, that the microphone is up front right here. We only have one tonight. We'll need you to speak loudly and clearly when you come up, and before you can actually speak on the topic that you wish to speak upon, we need you to state your full name and your address here in the town. Also, keep in mind that we will have a 5-minute limit on your question and answer session, so that everyone will have a chance to come up at least once. You're always welcome to come back up after that. So at this time, I'd like to bring up and introduce our first selectman, Mr. Michael Frieda.
Welcome and good evening. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you the town side of the budget in what was a complicated budget to put together. Tonight, I'll be proposing a tax increase. And I'd like to ask you for your undivided attention so I can take you through the reasons why, what has happened as we were contending with a parallel drama of a reduction of revenue and an inflationary increase in all aspects of our government. Let's start by providing some history. If we look back and we start at least at 2018, you will see the mill rate in 2018 was 31.18. It went down to 30.72, and from 2020 to 2022, the mill rate remained at 30.71. So in effect, there was no mill rate increase in the last 5 years, and you see the percentage of changes. This year, when we take a look at the current fiscal year, the budget is $116,023,597. When we look at the proposed budget, and we look at the percentage of changes, we see the town goes to $58,832,896 from $55,185,317. The capital has gone from $371,950 to $723,533. In this current fiscal year, the one 2022 to 2023, all of the cities and towns across the United States received federal ARPA funding. And this year, we used a lot of that money to fund capital. Patrick just went through the Board of Ed budget. We rounded it up here 2.5. You saw the actual percentage, 2.47. So when we look at the total budget increase, it's a 4.7% increase, and the dollar change is $5,476,786. When we look at this in the form of a pie chart, we see the Board of Education is at 51%, and the town is at 49%. The current mill rate, as you saw in previous slides, is 30.71. This proposed mill rate is 32.65. We're presenting a 1.94 mill rate increase this coming fiscal year. And I'm going to take you through the reasons why. Let's take a look before we get there as to a question you may have. A question that was posed to me last night at the Vietnam Veterans Ceremony. Mr. Frito, we understand there's going to be a tax increase this year. And I said, yes, there is, and I did explain the reasons why. And I learned something last night. And what I learned was that there is a perspective that when we come forward here and present a budget, sometimes it gets lost that there's already been a lot of work done before we get here. So let's take a look at the cuts that were made prior to us deriving a 1.94 mill rate increase. These are areas that were requests from all the different departments. The total, the word decrement is a word we use in government for the cuts, the subtractions from the original requests. The total decrements before we got here tonight were already $3,112,514. And when we look at the various areas of where that 3.1 million came from, I'm going to take you through each and every area. 4,000 came out of the election day expenses. 185,000 came out of the library. Now, these aren't, I want to be specific here, these aren't cuts to the existing services. These are decrements to the requests for more spending. Police, $234,000. And you can see the areas that we cut back from the requests to get to the 234,000. Police cruisers, the unmarked vehicle was taken out at 45,000. And you see portable radios. There was a request from the chief. We work very closely with our department heads and our public safety chiefs. And the firearms, we had planned to replace them. We probably should, but there's still perhaps another year that we can get by before we present that in next year's budget. So the total in the police from the request were cut $234,000. In the community services recreation department, $275,000 was cut out before we arrived tonight. Through the processes, through my office, the board of finance, prior to this meeting. In the fire department, we cut out $70,000. The administrative vehicle and the extrication equipment. We can make an argument that we need these things for public safety. In public works, we carve out $1,654,455 on the requests. One of the requests was that we provide every resident a brand new trash can and recycle bin for their efficiency's sake and ours with our trucks. But 1.3 million was really not necessarily a need at this point. It was more of a want on how to improve. So that's something down the road perhaps we would entertain. When we look at all of the capital, and we worked on that also, we took out $2,418,000 of capital requests. Almost 100% of the requests we eliminated. When we look at some of the additional budget decrements, we took out, we're self-insured on medical, $350,000 out of that. We reduced the contractual obligation line, $50,000. With the tremendous decline in volunteers that we've been talking about for years now, We took money out of that, the Volunteer Fire Association. Transportation and hauling, we took that down $10,000. That is storm debris that we take to the site that we have to pay not only to pick it up, but pay to get it removed. And unemployment compensation, we dropped that. Continuing along in the budget decrements, Patrick spoke about the $250,000. And yes, I did make the statement that I will not support any other budget cuts in the Board of Education because it will mean a cut in teachers and an increase in class size. And I will not support that. So when we look at the totals here, we see that $3,112,514 in red. Those are the cuts, again, before we got to a 1.94 mill rate increase. At a Chamber of Commerce business luncheon about 6 to 8 weeks ago, I gave a State of the Town address to the business community and various residents who were there. And I talked about how last year, inflation raged across the country 8.7%. All of us as people, as homeowners, were affected by that. Our government was not affected by 8.7%. But at that meeting, I spoke about how it was at least 3%. Now, I believe it's somewhere between 3.5 and 3.8% of inflationary costs that we have to absorb. And when you look at a $116 million budget, and you look at a 3.5% inflationary rate, that's well over $3 million right there. And where does that lie? Well, fuel costs have gone up tremendously. We have one of our departments that's already at budget, and here we are in April with more fuel costs to come. Electricity costs have gone up. Everything we do on building maintenance is basically outsourced, ladies and gentlemen. So we hire private contractors to do things in our buildings. The labor costs and the materials have jumped dramatically. And every Board of Finance meeting, there are questions as to why is that line higher? How come there's a building maintenance? Well, think about this as if you're living in your home. You certainly don't want your home to decline. There are upgrades that we need to do in our homes, much like our municipal buildings. Drainage, catch basin installation, tremendous cost increases. We have a dilemma on one of our streets. We have to improve some drainage. We go out to bid. We never anticipated the cost to be $737,000. I mean, that is really a number that we've never experienced before. Bridge work, we have to repair bridges for the safety of our motorists. The cost of that work has gone up. In our Water Pollution Control Authority, now that's outside of our budget, that's part of an enterprise fund, but those costs have gone through the roof. Even at our pool at our rec center, the equipment, the maintenance, the chemicals, all have risen dramatically. When we look at our fire department and paramedics, the medical supplies used by our paramedics and EMTs have risen dramatically. Public safety. We have to have public safety, ladies and gentlemen, much like we have to have and support the Board of Education. We've added new police officers. We've added new firefighters. And the cost of that, we have to have that. We have to pay for that. Pension contributions. I'll get into that a little bit later in terms of having to make pension contributions. Consider this. The cities and towns that have had problems are those cities and towns that have, to use a governmental phrase, kicked the can down the road by not making the pension payments. We have one town whom we work closely with on a variety of issues. They took a $120 million pension obligation bond to fill a gap in their pension system and didn't even get close to where the funding should be. we've always made the pension contributions here in North Haven. 100% of the ARC, which is an acronym for annual required contributions. Health insurance costs, we've had some significant claims, and health insurance costs have gone up. Even things like office supplies and postage, and debt. I'll take you through that in a moment. Consider this. In 2021, or prior to 2021, it cost us $200,000 a mile to pave a road. See the escalation there, ladies and gentlemen? This year, it's projected to be $300,000 a mile. Last year, instead of bonding for $2 million, 10 miles worth of roadways at $200,000, it cost us $260,000 to $270,000. This year, $300,000. So, with all that being said, let's take a look at some of the incremental expenses that we need to maintain the existing service model here in the town of North Haven and to even enhance services in certain areas. Well, of course, we have to support education. Patrick very nicely presented the budget and spoke about the $1,477,624. The town health insurance has increased $369,000. The pension obligations, we're paying more now to make the annual required contribution. And that annual required contribution has jumped up an additional $745,950. And when we look at the debt service in the town, three areas comprise the increase in our debt service line of $666,016. The middle school, the police department, and the fire departments. So I had a discussion here after the event last night, and someone asked about the debt. And I said that sometimes what gets lost is that once a building is built, that doesn't mean it's paid for. That means when you see it built and reopen, the payments are just beginning over the course of 15 to 20 years. So our debt service has increased in this coming fiscal year, again, $616,016. When we look at the operational side of the government, the police department, $819,831 more in operational costs to provide police public safety. The fire department, the operational side of our fire department, $475,686. So the total incremental expenditures is $4,554,501. Here's a summarization, and you can see the dollar change with public safety. Police, animal control, fire, civil defense, emergency management, and total public safety. So that has jumped 9.3%. But consider this, with the number of medical calls our fire department responds to on a regular basis, with the number of more fires we've had in town, that has increased. With, I hate to use the word here tonight, but crime all over the country, car break-ins, catalytic converters being stolen. We have to support police and fire. So our total public safety has jumped up 9.3%. The other side of this parallel drama is the revenue loss and the debt that I just referenced. So the revenue loss this coming fiscal year, we lost will lose $288,297 from the pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes. We no longer have $1,670,000 through the federal funding that every city and town received, and no city and town will receive starting July 1st. And we thought that federal ESSER 2 and 3, that $998,000, would be sent to the town. We did not receive it. It wasn't treated like we thought for the way ECS is treated, where we receive the money. So that has certain guidelines that have to be spent in a certain way, so the town does not have that money this coming year, nor did we receive it this current fiscal year. So take a look at the 288, the 1,670,000, and the 998. That's a revenue gap we have to fill. The debt, if we look at the aggregate debt, the middle school cost $69 million, less the reimbursement, which let's say was 30%. The police department headquarters, the new building, with an increase in telecommunication, $18 million. The firehouses, $9,247,000. Well, those were built 10 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, but we're still paying on that. And the road paving of 130 miles in the last 13 years. So just to repeat what I said a few moments ago, in the form of answering this question, what does this debt mean for the coming budget? It's that 7.3% increase, or that $666,016. Now, I cannot do anything about the debt, the pension contributions, and at this point, the health and medical costs. There are certain fixed expenses that we have to pay for. And those are three, including the debt. So you may be wondering, because people say, well, Mike, there's all this economic development. Where did we end up on economic development or development across the town? Well, we're generating another $1,363,000, which is already built into the revenue that's factored into the proposed mill rate increase. Now, I can tell each and every one of you, because I'm involved with every single project across the town except one that I wasn't happy about, that I heard about, but that's a whole nother story. That there's going to be more coming. You're going to see at least 2 major retailers coming to town. You're going to see other industrial businesses coming to town. You're going to see the A&M Bronx Bakery that I recruited from Westchester, New York, fully retrofit 50 Divine Street, put significant infrastructure in there that the town will collect taxes on in the future. So there's a lot of good things happening on that. This year, the $1,363,000 is not enough to offset the loss of revenue that I just mentioned and the incremental expenses. So you may ask, well, where are we, Mike? We talked about what you already cut before you got here. What does that leave us for capital? Well, in the fire department, it leaves us $350,000 for capital, of which $300,000 is this fire engine that we've been trying to get, that we are leasing and paying over a multiple-year period. Police, it leaves us with $104,000 in capital. 1 cruiser, body armor, emergency light bar, siren packaging, and portable radios. In public works, we basically eviscerated all of the requests, and we're down to what we have to pay, we're obligated, is jet back lease payment. $70,000. Well, that is, ladies and gentlemen, if there's a clogged catch basin or a clogged pipe, we deploy this vehicle to clear out those catch basins and any clogs within the system, those pipes underneath the roads. Recreation, we're down to $66,000. We have to replace the AC at the gym. There's too many children, there's too many people, seniors that are there, grandparents with their children. That has to be done. We have to maintain the pool like we do every year. The library, we're faced with an elevator, believe it or not, that we are really watching closely and we'll probably have to either repair or replace. In finance, we're coming up to another reval in 2024. Every 5 years, cities and towns are obligated to do a reval. So we're putting aside $20,000 for that. You see IT, we've done a great job through Alex Linos upgrading the IT department, and we have $10,000 for Martha Culver to help define folks from the Historical Society, those who have been very patient down through the years, looking for renovations. And on top of that, we do have a $600,000 grant that Rosa Delore and I have worked on to bring towards to the town of North Haven, with the help of Lynn Sadowski, who was kind enough to do all the paperwork on that grant. So the total capital request in this budget, $723,533. When we look at the budget history going back to 2018, we see increases of 4.9, 4.7, 2.9, 3.7, and this year 4.7. Again, the 4.7 increase is complicated by the loss of revenue that I showed each of you earlier in this presentation. What does this mill rate increase represent to the average homeowner? Well, the average home is valued at $300,000 in North Haven, but across every municipality, it is a 70% of the gross value where the tax assessment is levied. So we bring that down to $210,000. At 1.94 mils, it represents a yearly tax increase for that average home of $407, and that represents $34 a month. So let's recap this proposed budget. It supports education. It enhances our current public safety. Even though at our fire department, we're down to, the chief and I feel, less than 8 volunteers right now, versus over 130 or 140 just a few 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. So this maintains our existing services, and it covers the inflationary increase in the existing services. Now, before I summarize this, here's how I see it, ladies and gentlemen. I support this budget because in the now 14 years I've been here, I've learned an awful lot. And what I've learned is that the people in North Haven want the services. One of the things that I didn't really talk about was even leaf collection. That service has gone up. 11 years ago, when a budget failed, we tried to take that service out. We didn't think, back then, I didn't have the experience that I do now in terms of the local government. 4,000 people reached out for me, begging for that service back. So we're the only city in town that does that. Nobody else does what we do on leaf collection. So it's my opinion that North Haven's residents want the services. The question is, are you willing to pay the 1.94 mill rate increase to retain those services? I think you are. I know you may not like seeing a 1.94 mill rate increase, but I'm convinced and focused on the fact that North Haven residents want the services. And that's why we're proposing it this way. Because of the things I talked about. The inflation, the loss of revenue, but the future still remains very bright. There's going to be a lot of good things happening here, ladies and gentlemen, but sometimes we go into these valleys where things are a little bit different than what we've done here in the past. And in this case, in the last 5 years, no mill rate increase. If you take the 1.94 mill rate increase and average it out over all those other years, it's less than 0.4 tenths of a mill. And we really have added services here. So to summarize the next sequence of events, there will be a Board of Finance meeting on April 19th at 6:30. Some of the feedback we'll hear tonight will be taken into consideration by the Board of Finance. Then there will be another meeting, and I'll be back up here on Monday, May 8th at 7 p.m. And then, the beauty part about this government, unlike other governments, you have a voice and you have a vote. And that referendum will take place on May 16th. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Farida. At this time, I'd like to open up the floor to any comments, questions, requests for further information. If you'd like to come forward, the microphone's right there. And the first person I see raising their hand is our select woman, Mrs. Boyney. Ms. Boyney.
Good evening. Good evening. Sally Blamey, 5 Blossom Drive, and also a very happy UConn alumni. I was very happy with Superintendent Sturt's comments that he was able to absorb the $250,000 reduction in the Board of Education's increase without any impact on student services. I supported the $250,000 reduction that the Board of Finance voted on back in their March meeting. I thought it was a reasonable request. You all heard Mike Frida describe the challenges of this budget season with losing a lot of federal funding and increased costs. And so every department has to do their part. And I thought the $250,000 was fair. I think other districts, Board of Ed districts, would be envious of that. Look at Milford, which is in our DIRG. They had a 41% reduction in their requested increase. The Board of Ed, which went from 1.77 down to 1.47, was just a 14% decrease in the requested increase. Remember, they're still getting an increase. So I was very glad to hear that you were able to incorporate that request. Also, I do have 2 questions for the superintendent. I wanted to know, will he be coming out? Yes. This is a public hearing, so questions and answers are expected. Is that correct? Very good. I just wanted to know, Superintendent, a special Board of Ed budget meeting was scheduled for March 9th at 6 p.m. The agenda said it was to review the proposed budget and potential revised budget. And it was canceled about an hour before the meeting. Can you tell me why it was originally scheduled and why it was canceled at the last minute?
It was decided upon to review at the upcoming regular meeting.
I was at the regular meeting and it wasn't reviewed.
That was the decision at the time. We did discuss a little bit at the time, I believe, if I'm thinking about it correctly.
Okay.
But it wasn't in detail.
Okay. And my second and final question for you is on the Board of Ed Administrators page of the budget. If you all picked up a packet out there, the Board of Ed pages aren't numbered, but it's the page right before page 19. You have a new position that you didn't mention when you were discussing new positions, the 3 elementary school teachers and the athletic trainer. It's again on the Board of Ed Administrators. It says an administrator on special assignment for $163,197 in salary. That was not in the existing current budget. What is that position?
So it's not currently a position. It is an agreement, personnel agreement that I really am not able to comment further on at this time.
Oh, but is the money in the budget?
The money is in the budget, yes.
Okay, but not the position.
Correct.
Oh, okay, all right. And now just switching over to the town side, I have a few comments. I was also at the veterans meeting last night, and I was approached by some folks who may be different folks than you were, Michael. And I guess they caught wind of the increase, the mill rate increase, and they said, Sally, you gotta show Mike that paper where he signed it years ago that said if Amazon comes to town, there'll never be a mill rate increase again in this town. And they're saying, you gotta give him you have to, show that to him, give it to him. I have it right here. And I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna throw this in the first selectman's face. In fact, I'm gonna bring it up because it was a promise that simply couldn't be kept. Actually, this was a copy. I have the original at home. It's from my Mike and Sally 1 year's scrapbook that I'm working on. So I have the original. That was just for dramatic effect. I'm not going to do that because it wasn't even irresponsible to say. I have too much respect for the first selectman to say that. It was just wrong because our budgets at that time, which is around 2017, were going up 2.5 to 3 million a year, and the revenue that we were taking in from Amazon just would never be enough to cover that year after year, increase after increase. So I don't hold the first selectman to that piece of paper, even though I'm keeping it. So for those of you who were expecting me to be screaming at him, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But in many ways, I agree with the first selectman, especially when it comes to debt. He talked about the $666,000 increase, but really over the past few years, it's closer to $3 million. I remember not too many years ago, our debt was about $6 million. And you have to look at all that we've done. The middle school, like Mike said, the police department, the fire department, all the paving, lots of paving. School security, we're doing athletic, we bonded for athletics. This all costs money. And you all voted for that money when you came to town, well, not very many showed up, but we had town meetings on all of that bonding and you all supported it. And on some of that bonding, we had referendums to give everybody the opportunity. So when you support all of those services, you have to pay for them. The only thing I'd like to ask Mike is, do you have any inkling that we might be able to improve a little bit on some revenue line items, specifically the pilot or the education cost sharing? I've been reading the papers and watching reports from the Connecticut Commons municipalities that there might be some improvement there. Do you have any update since the March Board of Finance meeting on potential revenue?
So here's what we think. I have a very good feeling that we'll have an increase in ECS, education cost sharing. That'll go to the Board of Ed. There is a lesser probability of us receiving a share of the sales tax increase that the state may derive somewhere in the next fiscal year. So if that happens, we can't budget for it because we don't know if we're going to get it. But if we do, then what that will do is add an incremental revenue item to our collections that's not in this budget. But I do think it would be wrong if we were to just try to inflate that revenue item, not knowing that there's even a 50% chance to get it. And Sally's right about this Amazon. I did make that statement. But what I didn't realize 5 or 6 years ago was what we were going to be faced with. Here we are now, 6 years later. Inflation, with the cost of trying to protect the public. So I wish I could turn back the clock and not make the statement I made like that. Amazon is still the largest taxpayer in town and the largest employer, roughly $4.7 million in tax revenue. And that'll continue to go up over the next couple of years because we're phasing up to 100% of the real estate. So I do regret making that statement. It took 5 years or 6 years, but it unfortunately could not be maintained. So the answer to Sal's question, 2 items. I think there'll be an ECS increase. I don't think there'll be a pilot increase, but I think there's a chance for sales tax revenue that we could get. Thank you.
And remember, the ECS is part of our revenue budget. It goes to the town. And Mike, on Amazon, yes, we're getting near the end of our phase-in on real estate taxes. But as you noticed on the grand list, and as I predicted a couple of years back, the personal property depreciation is eating away at some of the tax revenue from Amazon. Now, hopefully, they'll replace some depreciated property with new property, and it'll go back up. But there was certainly a decline on our grand list of industrial property and commercial property. And the assessor specifically mentioned the depreciation, little box, right?
Yes.
Because of personal property.
There's, not to try to provide a levity here tonight, there's sort of a comical aspect to this because we had anticipated that the thousands and thousands of robots in Amazon would have depreciated a lot, or would appreciate less than what they did. So that's the bad news in terms of the personal property depreciation. The good news is that when those robots start getting replaced, that's incremental tax revenue from the town on the personal property side. So it's a good point.
I guess robots are a lot like cars. As soon as they roll off the lot, they're down and down. But I like, hopefully, to see a little tweak in additional revenue. And I still think that at that April meeting, you could look at some of those town side operational lines. Mrs. Baird had provided every member of the Board of Finance with a list. I do believe that the contractual obligation line under personnel policy on page 25 can go down to $200,000. I did check what I had said at the Board of Finance meeting, that the fire department budget did expire. The fire department CBA expired just this past June, so there won't be 3 years in the rear, which is Mr. Halligan suggested. And also, unusually, the increases for the fire department are already built into the budget. And you had told us at the February Board of Finance meeting that that was in anticipation of renewing the CBA. Usually, you don't see an addition to lines of expired personnel lines for expired CBAs until the following year. So those two things combined, that I was correct about the expiration of the CBA, and that you already have raises built in on the employment table on page 42 for the fire department. I think that you can look at that contractual obligation line under personnel policy as well. But I know I'm over my time, so I really want to hear from everybody. I'm really pleased with the turnout. I have been, in my 10 years on the Board of Selectmen, I have been at this microphone at public hearings and seen nothing but empty seats. So I'm really pleased with the turnout, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to come forward and speak or ask questions? Yes, yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mark Nicole, 600 Washington Avenue, B2. I'm a retired fire volunteer. Also, currently treasurer of one of the fire associations for approximately about 10 years. Just like to make a few comments and have a question. One is there was a comment made that there were less than 8 volunteers in the remaining 2 volunteer firehouses from the 3 that were closer to 20. The funds that were given were $33,000 split between the 3, $11,000 each. With the 2 remaining, if it was at the $11,000, it would be $22,000. And now that line item is $13,000 and $6,500 each. That doesn't have the fire associations which use the money, which I'll talk about as part of the fire company's volunteers. In the past, when the town handed the money over, and it was kept by the associations, there were annual reports that were submitted to the town. Whether they read them or not is a different story. After a few years back, there was a meeting between Mr. Frieda, the finance director, the volunteer fire captains, some of the treasurers, and some other representatives, where the money was held by the town, and the money was spent through PO, so that the town knows what was being spent at. It was deferred. In the past, there were things that were spent like that, which was things like saws, NICs, which are infrared cameras that are used, axes, alligators, pieces of equipment, other pieces of equipment that were needed, flashlights that the volunteers used. The volunteers are also they do the parades, so they're the honor guard that's used for a lot of functions in the town. They would like pieces that they needed for that. So there was always items done with that. So the 6,500 will impact them. I don't understand why it wasn't kept at the 11,000. I know you're cutting everywhere, but comment being if there's no volunteers, it's not necessarily the case. So I'd like to understand a little bit better what that reason was all of a sudden.
So Mark, it's a projection as to what we see with the decline of the volunteers. So if it's your position tonight that you are saying that it's not enough, then tell us what you think it should be. We'll put it back to the Board of Finance, and we'll see if we can get it reinstated.
Well, I think you would have seen this past year what was spent between them. I know that we spent close to it. So you know what that.
So what's the number?
If you want to make it reasonable, make it 90,000.
Okay.
I mean, it's still a reduction, understood, instead of the 13,000, and there needs to be some cuts. But it's still useful that's needed. I mean, the town doesn't just buy all those other little things that are needed. A lot of that does go to understandably to the pay force. But, it goes back to the town.
All right. We will take that under consideration. You say add another 9,000? Is that what you're saying, Mark?
I think it should be 9,000 each instead of 6,500 each.
Okay. So 7,500 more, roughly. All right. We'll take a note.
So it's still a reduction.
All right. We will take that under consideration. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to come up and speak? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Scott Friedman. I'm at 17 Cooper Road. Can you talk into the mic?
Is there a way to turn the mic up?
Did it turn off? Hello?
There you go.
Better? Okay. Hi, I'm Scott Friedman, 17 Cooper Road. So I first want to appreciate all the work that the Board of Finance and the First Selectmen have done to get to this point. It's an incredibly hard year, and swallowing a tax increase at any point is hard. After the years of COVID, I think is even harder. I'm a parent of an incoming kindergartner, and I just want to say sort of aloud that we need to fully fund education. I appreciate where Superintendent Sturck is coming from, having taken the funds from places that aren't direct student services. And I am very appreciative of the fact that, as Third Selectwoman Sally Buemi said, that there may be additional educational cost-sharing funds coming. But I want to be really clear. Public education is under attack across the country. And from some of the meetings that I've seen, even in town, in North Haven, I'm very appreciative of the fact that we are funding student services. And I also want to say that the Board of Ed deserves to have the fiscal autonomy that they have in this town and that has become part of a formal memorandum of understanding with the Board of Finance. And I want to ensure that our town is hearing the voices that support education, that want to invest in education fully. And I don't have any specific questions. I'm not sure, aside from the $25,000 that was cut from heating reserves and the $100,000 from tuition, I'm not personally aware of where that tuition funding goes. I am understanding that it's to fund students who are going to out of district services, but that could impact students. And I sort of appreciate the acceptance of this being a tough budget year and of trying to make that as low impact as possible. But it's a signal to new parents who are sending their kids to school for the first year. It's a signal to prospective parents. And I have to admit that on a marginal basis, our taxes are 20 mils lower than our next door neighbors in Hamden. I have many friends who want to come to North Haven, both for the services and for the lower tax rate. And those folks need to see that we're investing in our schools. I'm looking up here and I see the wallpaper coming off on the side. I'm understanding that there is no capital funding allocation for next year. It is quite possible, as has been done in the past, that there might be funds that, with the autonomy that the Board of Ed has, that they can apply to some of the maintenance and some of the capital improvements that are needed here and at our elementary schools. But I think it is actually, despite the claim earlier, it is directly impacting student services to take that money off the top of the budget. At the higher number, the 2.87 number, the 2.9 number, that was still below inflation, as First Selectman Fried has been saying. So, I don't necessarily have any specific line item that I would restore. I do, however, think that there's room between 1.94 and say 1.98 mils that would recover almost half of what was cut from the Board of Ed. And I think that would be a great signal to the town and to prospective members to further increase our enrollment and to increase our tax base. So thank you very much for your time and energy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. One moment. Mr. Sturdick would like to comment.
Mr. Freeman, I know you didn't have a question, but I did just want to clarify your understanding of the tuition line is correct. It is for out of district tuition, and that contingency is in place for the just in case students move into district, that we have the funds to account for them. In the past, that just in case many times does come true. But again, it was lowered, it wasn't eliminated, so there are still funds available.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, sir.
Hi, Tim Gabriel, 18 Renee Lynn. Also wanted to thank everybody for the incredible amount of work that goes into preparing these budgets and taking, lots of time, thought, about like everything that goes into it. Did want to speak, just give a few words of support.
Mr. Gabriel, just get a little closer to the mic.
Oh, sure. For the education budget and just a little bit of context behind that too. So this is a particularly volatile and tumultuous time for education, and we're still reeling from the aftershocks of the COVID-19 pandemic in the form of social, mental health, and academic gaps. And educators have also been under attack from a well-funded national campaign, and they're also feeling the heat from the additional burdens laid upon them. Many are leaving the profession en masse, and not just teachers, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, custodians, and administrators too. Though North Haven schools are exceptionally well managed and are generally supported by the community, they're not immune from these trends and attacks. And I understand the difficult position that the town is facing right now, right, with rising costs and economically distressed population. Even though North Haven has a slightly higher median income than many of its neighbors and a lower poverty rate, the pain is certainly being felt all around. And the resources to fund education and essential services that could alleviate this distress do exist, but they're being shielded by our neighbors to the south and wealthier communities. It would help out towns like ours greatly if our representatives from both sides of the aisle could figure out a way to redistribute the wealth that our working people of Connecticut create so that even a well-managed town like North Haven isn't constantly on the leading edge of having to diminish its way of life. But in lieu of that, the best way to push through this tough situation is to make a commitment to invest in education. Hidden from this conversation tonight is the fact that there are vital improvements, well, I guess not entirely hidden, that continually get delayed due to the persistent lack of appetite or presumed lack of appetite for additional funding. In fact, there is a growing list of capital improvement that I know Mr. Stirk presented on the education side that were presented but intentionally left out of the final figures in a sign of good faith regarding the tough decisions of the budgeting season. And just one of those, to give an example, it's a little bit disturbing to me that my children have had to, they both go to Clintonville Elementary over the past 8 years or so, and each of those years has been the hottest year on record. And so they've just been kind of sitting in these classrooms while they've been boiling, but we're not even beginning to have the conversation that we need to have about getting those old buildings stacked up with air conditioning, or the possibly even more costly alternative of replacing those schools. Neither of my two children will ever see a final week of elementary school classes where they do not come home sweaty, exhausted messes from simply sitting in classrooms that need to be updated. And I'm particularly concerned that the final Board of Finance workshop had cut this $250,000 from the proposed budget by deciding, and this was like their only recommendation, that the two positions that were created through federal funds during the pandemic, and one position created out of the need for equitable resources for a growing English learning population, were unnecessary. If the Board of Education were to adopt these changes, and I'm thankful that they didn't, it would roll back some of the progress that we have made in addressing those learning loss gaps from the pandemic, and would particularly impact students of color looking to adapt to a new cultural learning environment. Furthermore, I've heard several times throughout the past year that planning for these rising costs in a year like this, by putting aside reserve funds, should be considered a surplus, and that the funds should be returned to the taxpayers. Taxpayers who, mind you, voted in a referendum for the education budget. This tactic seems to be a way of penalizing good governance, an attack on a principle that, when adopted in the private sector, is just common sense when you know that there will be good years and there will be years that are like this one. And it does seem to be like that's where some of the hurt is coming from. It's just kind of like that planning of gas, heat, things like that costs go up. So First Selectman Frida, I know, has remarked on a number of occasions that one of the main things that draw people to our town, our schools, security, and economic development. And I would say that this is probably correct, but whereas I'm very comfortable with where we are from a security standpoint, from an economic development standpoint, I do worry for the future of our students. Our schools have a history of stretching every dollar and making sure that most of the limited resources that we use are being used well, even as costs go up for healthcare, energy, supplies, salaries, things like that. But the students and educators have gotten a raw deal these past few years, and now is not the time to turn our backs on them. We need a sincere investment into the schools to avoid poor outcomes, further exoduses of qualified teachers, and loss of our educational status as one of the high benchmarks of our town. So I'm going to urge everybody in here to vote for the budget. If we could find a way to restore the funds that were cut back to the education budget, I would be in favor of that. But I want to make sure that our children get an education with all the care, attention, and support that they need.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Stacy. My name is Tim Donoghue, Chairman of the Board of Finance and Senator. So I just want to address the two bits for just a moment, if you don't mind, sir. It's come up twice now. I think the consensus amongst the board members was that the 250 was cut because it was 3 positions, which were converters from grants. And the way the Board of Ed presented their budget to the Board of Finance was slightly different than the way the town departments did. We did have other requests for new positions by departments within town government. The Board of Ed chose to put their requests within their budget. Some of the other town departments brought their budgets to the Board of Finance, but their requests for new positions were verbalized, they were not in the numbers. So there's a slightly different way that the request came into the Board of Finance. And then the other reason is what we all know. It's a very tough budget year, and I think what you found, I think what the board members felt was that it wasn't the time to add new positions. Now, you heard the superintendent give his presentation. They do have some discretion in their budget. He found other ways to cut the 250, and that's his prerogative. So the three positions are still in the budget that he presented earlier, but I thought I would just give the rationale a little bit for how that cut came to be during the Board of Finance sessions. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Dane. Would anyone else like to, yes, Mr. Katz?
Sherman Katz, 40 Sherwood Drive. Resident and voter, North Haven for 55 years. Longer than some of you young people who've been on this earth. I think the superintendent did a great job this year with his budget. It seems as though he's going to be able to do things he has to do or wants to do with the funds that he's receiving. I can remember years when the townspeople voted budgets down because the Board of Education was not getting enough money. I don't think you people were even on this earth at that time. But we voted budgets down because we wanted more money for schools. We always supported schools. Our kids went to school. My kids are grown up. But I still pay for your kids in school. And I'll do that, and I do it gladly. That's what I have to say about the Board of Education. Thank you, Mrs. Sturk. I think you did a great job this year. I want to talk about a few things. Mike brought up the leaf collection program. He said about 4,000 people pushed back on eliminating the leaf program. But we have a system in this town where the high school kids will volunteer to help with leaves, and I believe Quinnipiac will also help. You said 4,000 people pushed back. I think our population is somewhere in the 25 to 30,000 range.
Just shy of 25.
25,000.
It's a little less.
So, you know, it's not even 35% of the people, not even 25% of the people push back on that. So 75% of the townspeople are paying for your leaf collection. I pay for my own leaf collection. I don't depend on the town to do it. That cost, according to Mike Frieda, about 5 years ago, was $500,000. That's a lot of money to take leaves away. So I would like to see that eliminated. Right. The talk about the mill rate going up and down. When we have a reval, usually that means the mill rate goes down. So it's a little skewed when you see something that says 31 mills this year and 30 mills next year, which you'd be paying more taxes because your property value went up because of reval. So just keep that in mind. This raise in taxes was somewhere around $400 some odd, $500 per household. But most households have 2 cars. That's another $100, $150 a year. So we're no longer $4 change, we're more like $550. And that brings us up to somewhere around the $50, $60 a month area. Pardon my, I'm not using a calculator, this is off the top of my head. We listened to department heads talk about contractual raises and increases. I mean, I worked for 60 years too, so I always wanted an increase. But a contractual increase is not something that came out of the thin air. That's something that was negotiated, and the department heads, the town, agreed to these things. It's not like it came out of the thin air. So they are the ones that are raising the raise on a contractual agreement. We're not talking about legal things now. The town from the federal government got about $11 million during this epidemic problem. I think it was 7 for the Board of Education and 4 for the town, round figures. That could have taken or should have taken a lot of the major capital expenses.
Other way around.
Pardon?
Other way around.
It didn't.
7 for the
Oh,
town.
7 for the Board of Ed and 4 for the town.
Let's speak
Was the
into the
other way?
microphone so
Sorry
everyone
about
can
that.
hear. Please.
So as Sally said, it was 4 for the Board of Ed and 7 for the town. I stand corrected. I looked at the pension line in the budget, and I see that our contribution is going up. Now, we have what's called a defined benefit that was supposed to almost eliminate most of the pension. But what I think, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, as we get more people retiring and the new people are coming in and you're not having the pension contribution because of the defined benefit, that means the town has to put more money in to take care of those people that are retired. So I don't think we're going to see a return on that investment for another 10, 15 years. That's going to continue to grow. Every year, I've heard Mike said, Mr. Frieda say, we want to keep our increases to 3% or less. Well, the town is 4.7, if I'm not mistaken. We're way above the 3%. I would like to see the town trim a little bit more. We're not talking education now, we're talking about the town side of the budget. And again, one of the things I think is very simple to do is the leaf pickup. There are alternatives to doing that. Thank you for your time, and I hope I helped a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Caldwell, when you get that mic, it can really get close to it.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Janet Caldwell, 69 Kimberly Circle, North Haven, Connecticut. I think the first thing I want to just, Mr. Katz mentioned the contractual obligations and the increases in contracts. And I think you said that the department heads had a hand in negotiating that, and that's not actually true. So the contracts are negotiated with the finance department, and it's the Board of Selectmen that vote on that. So, the chief of the fire department, the chief of the police department have absolutely, they are not negotiating those contracts. So I just wanted to clarify that. So that was one thing. The other thing is that for me, the number one thing that we need to be investing in is public safety. And unfortunately, for years, we've really been deciding not to put the money into public safety. If you look at this budget, we've cut the request for the Jaws of Life. If I'm in a car accident and I need to be extricated out of a car, I want my fire department to have the equipment they need to do that. The other thing that was pulled out of the budget and has been consistently pulled out of the budget year after year is having administrative vehicles where you'll have a chief on scene or a deputy chief in order to ensure that the scene is safe and that it's being managed well. And we continue to cut that year after year. Apparatus has been a problem. We let it go for a really long time. We are now investing in it, but when we continually ask the town to cut in order to make sure that the Board of Ed gets, increases, people don't like to say, they like to say we support education. I also think when we support education, we need to be supporting public safety. In terms of services, I just would like to say I agree with you that there are some services in town where we're all paying for services that we don't all use. And for one particular example is the convenience center. I have a very small car. I recycle. I might take a garbage, a bag of garbage every once in a while, but I see, I was there a couple weeks ago and there was a soda machine that was being thrown in the garbage. So we're paying for the waste and recycling of people who bring in truckloads while, other people don't use it. And so I think there may be a way for the Board of Finance to look at, or for the town to look at, either, when you come in and you dump, maybe there's some kind of way, or based on weight, or how much, and I would be, willing to pay my fair share for what I use, and I should be paying for, that amount of waste and recycling that other people are bringing truckloads in week after week after week. So that's maybe just one example of maybe some ways to make it more fair in terms of whether we bill for services or not. It would also make people a little bit more conscious when they're going to recycle or they're going to dump, what they're getting rid of and how they're doing that. So I guess for me, public safety comes first before it else. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, Mr. Scola.
Good evening. My name is Peter Criscola, 54 Fieldstone Court, former Democratic Town Chair, former Fire Commissioner. The first thing I'd like to say tonight is the first public meeting since the tragic loss of our firefighter, Matthias Worth. I'd like to ask everyone for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. The most important thing to me is public safety, obviously, and the fire department is number one. We have our chief sitting right here. We have our fire commissioner, chairman. The chief has asked for the last several years to add 2 firefighters each year to the budget. We started doing that, and then we stopped. Okay, why, I don't know. We are less safe now than we were 16 years ago. 15 to 16 years ago, if the alarm went off and we had a crisis, we had at least 6 to 7 engines respond, a ladder truck, a rescue truck, and approximately 40 firefighters. Today, in the same environment, the same call, you're going to get 2 engines, a ladder truck, a rescue, and our paid firefighters are 11, and maybe we'll get a half a dozen or so volunteers. Now, the volunteer response is not due to the fire chief or to the administration. Under Mike's administration, and I don't mind to call you Mike, under his administration, he built a new firehouse for the volunteers. He refurbished 2 firehouses. He added engines, equipment, and apparatus. We cannot retain firefighters, and that's a national problem. It's not just in North Haven. This is why when the chief asks for personnel, it's not because he wants to just see faces in the firehouse. It's because we need them. It's paramount for us to survive. We've put on, in the last 15 years, approximately 1,000 apartments, not counting commercial space, retail space, and industrial space. All of that has nothing to do with a drain on public works, because that's all privately contained. All it has to do is drain on the chief. It drains on the fire department. We always said, and I always said this, and excuse me if I jump around, I don't have notes in front of me. I don't speak from a paper, I speak from my heart. You go on a plane, the first thing an attendant tells you is if we have a problem, go for your mask first, your oxygen mask first, so you can help someone who doesn't have an oxygen mask but can't get it. Well, that's what the chief wants to do with firefighters. They are our oxygen masks. That's what we need. Now, we have 2 federal investigations going on right now because of the loss of life of a firefighter in the active duty, okay? The one thing that's definitely going to come out of those two reports, we did not have a safety officer. There was none. Would that have saved his life? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But it sure is going to show we didn't have him. We didn't follow protocol. We need firefighters. We need to put 4 back into the budget. We need that. Fire commissioner said about extrication tools. That's a must. Do you or your child want to be trapped in a car you can't get out because we have an extrication tool, a Jaws of Life, that is old, the battery isn't strong enough, it doesn't cut through the metal, it doesn't spread the door, and God forbid they die? Do you want to have that on your conscience because you stopped them from getting it? We have extrication tools. We have a new one that just came out. The rest of them are 4 or 5 years old. I gave one to the fire department. I know how old it is, okay? But you need them. You need a flight car. You have a chief, 2 deputy chiefs. They need to get to the scene. Chief's car was down. We don't want hand-me-down cars from the police department or from any other department in town. We're not a hand-me-down department. And now we need span of control. We have, the op is to have 4 firefighters and an officer. 4 to 1, 10 to 2. We have 11 firefighters on right now. When we go to a fire scene, our volunteer fire department, by the way, has dropped approximately 92%. We went from 105 on duty and 50 in reserve to right now to less than 20, as you heard everyone say. We're less than 20. So and we have a 25% overlap in our call volume. So we're not going to always get the 11 that we want from the firehouse because they may be dispatched someplace else. So you may get 7, you may get 9, you may get 6, plus whatever we get from the volunteers. On another point, we have right now, we have spent money to take a test for lieutenants. 5 took it, 5 passed. 3 of which were on Captain Marino's shift, which I give him credit for having men that he's educated to that level. The chief will tell you that we have a span of command that's op is 5, outside is 7. We're in the middle right now. But if we get the SAFER grant at the end of the year, or if the town decides they are going to put on the 4 firefighters that we need, that the chief wants, okay, and gives us the car so we have an officer at all times. We're going to need that extra officer on the scene. I'm asking in the second half of this that we elevate the 4 firefighters that are left on the list that pass the test. They've already passed. The test could cost the town about $4,000 or $5,000. Rather than wait till the end of the year, if we get the grant, and sometimes the government says, when you're successful like we are in North Haven, we have a successful town, we have a successful leadership, we have a AAA bond rating. Maybe we shouldn't give you the grant because you're too successful. We're going to punish you for being successful. We're going to give it to a town that's not that good. So maybe we don't get it. Maybe we don't get the 4 firefighters, but we need them. So maybe the town will say, okay, fine, we're going to give you the 4 firefighters. At that point, we're going to need 4 more officers. I'm asking that we elevate them right now. In the outcome, we are going to get them. The 2 federal investigations are going to show that we were short on scene, firefighters and an officer for safety, okay? We're using mutual aid all the time. Our surrounding towns are tired to pick up our slack. Our failure to prepare is not the other town's problems. For our safety officers, every subordinate town around us, Meriden, Wallingford, Hamden, East Haven, New Haven, they all have a safety officer. We don't have one. It's not something we're asking for that's out of the realm that we don't need. We need one. Right now, putting these officers up also fits everything into one place. There's no downside. It's a $28,000 cost. Not to put on one, but to put 4 on. To elevate 4 is $28,000. What do we have? 5,000 people in town?
Almost.
Almost?
And you're running out of time.
That's $1 a person. That's $1 a person in the yearly budget of your household to put on 4 more officers. Not take them off, just elevate them so they can come on and help expand the community. That's all I have to say. And I hate to point people out, but over the past year, we're getting a lot of resistance from our third selectman with the fire department and our finance board. Why we're getting that, I don't know. Why we're going after the fire department, I don't understand that. Why we're so critical. This is public safety. Saves your life also. They are the oxygen masks that we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Mr. Frieda? Please. And then Mr. Mazzio. Thank you.
So thank you, Peter, thank you, Jenny, and thank you for those who are speaking for public safety. We certainly support public safety. So, we had added 2 firefighters in the last few budgets here. And the reason you don't see it this year is the chief and I mapped out a plan to file for a safer grant that Mr. Criscola just mentioned. So the chief is working hard to file the paperwork for the grant. And we won't know if we're going to get the grant probably until next year at this time. But that grant will be a significant amount of firefighters if we do get it. If we don't get it, you're going to see me here a year from now. I'm going to present you a plan based on all of the economic development that was just mentioned, the apartments. I'm working on bringing 2 retailers on Washington Avenue from where the fairgrounds is all the way up to exit 13. You're going to see a major development on the north side of Amazon. I'm trying to bring an additional grocery store there. You're going to see a significant development on the property that's diagonally across from the fairgrounds. That's going to bring a lot of cars and a lot more traffic there, that 5-lane state highway. But if that safer grant doesn't go through, you're going to see a plan from me that's going to present a paid fire department in the Northeast Firehouse next year. The reason we didn't put the 4 in this year because of the safer grant or the 2 in this year because of the safer grant strategy. Now I'm open to the span of control issue in terms of the 4 lieutenants, but I'm only open to it for the 28,000. I have to have the fire department support it. If the fire department wants it, we can do it. If the fire department thinks we don't need it, then I'm certainly going to accept the fire department's explanation on that particular issue. So there is a plan to increase public safety in the fire department. You don't see it necessarily in this year's budget because of the filing for the safer grant, but you will see it. You'll see a significant plan on how to fortify the northern part of town with all that development that was just spoken about that Mr. Criscola referenced. So thank you.
Before you leave, you're 100% right, and I'm sure that your word is gold. And we will have more firefighters by next year. I know that. This is why elevating the 4 firefighters now on a paid exam, we've already paid for the exam, we have them in place. Next year, if you say yes, we're going to put them on. We put on 4 more firefighters, 6 more. We already have the lieutenants in place. They've already been paid for. The test is paid for. We don't have to retest it. The list ends in a year, but we have a 6-month. We can go to 18 months. By the time all this takes place, we're looking at the end of that structure, and we'll have to retest again. Plus, the 4 firefighters that elevate to lieutenant right now will have a year under their belt of service as a lieutenant. They will learn a lot more being a lieutenant under the captain and the chief. They will learn a lot more how to be leaders. So we'll be ahead of the curve, and we'll be ahead of the federal investigation reports. That we've taken the first step. Mr. Frieda, thank you very much. You're always a gentleman.
Would you like to speak? Thank you.
Good evening, all. Pasquale Nuzzolillo, 7 Mansfield Road, Chairman of the North Haven Fire Commission. I first of all would like to thank all of our residents for supporting public safety in the fire department and the police department in this town. They have absolutely been supportive and it's deeply appreciated. I also want to thank everyone who has come out and offered their condolences during our most difficult time in the North Haven history of the fire department. I thank each and every one of you who have done so. Thank you. I also want to say, as many of the other speakers have indicated, it's a daunting task for our Board of Finance to come up with a budget during an economic year such as we're having today. There's no question about it. It's a difficult task. I use the slogan quite often. I steal it from TJ Maxx, the max for the minimum. Unfortunately, many residents want the most amount of services for the least amount of money. That can't be done. I think Mr. Frieda and Mr. Sturz clearly indicated what the needs are of the Board of Education, which I totally and completely support, and certainly from the town side, Mr. Frieda has come up with, and the Board of Finance has come up with a plan. You may know that I have never, I should say, I have not always been in support of the Board of Finance's comments and answers to what our requests have been as far as the fire department is concerned, but I respect what they have to do. I'm here tonight to say that a special issue has arisen and has come to our Board of Fire Commission, and it's been discussed by our commissioners. And Commissioner Cardwell, thank you very much for your comments. Past Commissioner Pasquale, thank you for yours. Very much appreciated. I'd like to make a proposal to our First Selectman Frieda. During a recent Fire Commission meeting, the commissioners were made aware of several instances in which fire inspection records are being requested. Recently, there have been a few which are likely to result in court hearings for any numerous of reasons. As you know, we currently use independent contractors to serve for fire commissioners and fire investigators. The issue of professional liability, general liability, and workers' compensation is of concern to the Fire Commission, which receives a monthly report from the fire chief. Mike, what steps can we take to be sure that those individuals we have that are conducting fire inspections on behalf of the town are protected when they're investigating fire scenes they've covered under workers' compensation by the town? Michael, please.
Thank you, Pat. So let me explain what this is about, because we have discovered that there's liability for the individuals, liability for the fire department, and liability for the town. So we have these two fire marshal inspectors. One is part-time and one is full-time. The gentleman who's full-time does not accept town benefits. It's strictly a salary. The gentleman who's part-time worked with the town, retired, and working with the town part-time as an inspector. So follow me along on this. It's a very important point that the commissioner brings up. So we discovered that they do not have liability insurance. Puts them in a precarious position, puts the fire department in a precarious position, and puts the town in a precarious position. So it was brought to my attention, and it was a problem that I tried to solve. Or had a lot of nights I was wondering, how are we going to solve this problem? Both of them, these two gentlemen, are tremendous at what they do. Both of them help us comply with a very arduous state statute that requires the fire department, fire marshal, to inspect buildings and businesses. It's mandated by the state. And if we every city and town is delinquent right now across the state, that's a problem. But the real issue is that if they don't have, and our insurance company, this is a key point, ladies and gentlemen, our insurance company will not provide insurance for them, workman's comp and general liability, because they're classified as outside contractors. So the solution is that I will be going back to the Board of Finance, and for the same dollars, we're not changing the salaries, with a full-timer and with a part-timer, we'll change the employee table designation and get away from the outside contractor designation and classify one of them as a part-time employee and the other one as a full-time employee. The dollars will remain the same in terms of the full-timer's compensation, the part-timer's compensation. And they will then fall under the town's general liability and workman's compensation insurance policies. This eliminates the liability risk for the consultants who now become employees, for the fire department, for the town, and for the residents of North Haven who would not have to endure that type of liability that doesn't exist and it falls on the taxpayers. So we have a problem. I've identified a solution. We have to go back and change between now and the next Board of Finance meeting the table of organization to eliminate general contractors and reposition it as full-time employee, part-time employee. That's the plan.
Thank you very much, Michael. Great solution. Appreciate it very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Friedman as well. Would anyone else like to come and speak? Yes, Amanda Gabriel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Gabriel, 18 Renee Lane. I serve on the Board of Education here, but I'm not speaking as a board member. I'm just speaking as a mom. I wanted to just take a moment to talk a little bit about the impact that our budget dollars have on safety and education. So I've emailed Chief Jankowski several times over the past couple of years. One time because I had a medical emergency, and before I even could get my shoes on, our emergency services were at my house. And I just appreciate that. That is priceless. And the second time I emailed him was for Stop the Bleed kits needed to be purchased for the Board of Education. It's a terrible thing to have to spend money on, right? But the chief, through a painstaking process, went through and gathered all of the materials that were needed and worked hand in glove with us to get us these materials and get us these kits for far less than it would have cost if we purchased them from a manufacturer. So thank you very much. I do love how in North Haven, part of what makes this place so special is the people here. Sikorsky, hi. One of my favorites, I sing these things about Jimmy Hunterback all the time. Like, we have a fantastic public works department. We have a fantastic Board of Education. And I'm very, very thankful for all the work that goes into this. There are real people behind these things. People talk about administrators. When they come here, I want to just tell you a quick story about an administrator. My daughter had major brain and skull surgery when she was 5 years old. Her school administrator came to our house with a homemade owl pillow, which is the mascot of the school, to make her feel better. This is a special place. I support this budget, and I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Because we're never going to come to the point where anyone wants to speak a second time. Going once? Going twice? Okay. So would anyone else like to speak for a second time? Come on down.
Yes, Sally Lane. Just wanted to comment on a couple of things. First, on the Board of Ed, I think that we've heard some comments about a national effort to attack education. I think here in North Haven, there's a very strong support for education. Last year, the Board of Ed was given every dollar that they requested in their budget request, their budget increase. The year before that, they were given every dollar that they requested. And 3 years ago, they had a $200,000 reduction and a very significant increase. So I think that's a good track record of support for education. I have stood at this microphone in my 10 years on the Board of Selectmen when there were far fewer people here advocating for education funding, especially in the 2015 referendum budget process. I'm a graduate of North Haven High, and so there is tremendous support, and I again am appreciative that the $250,000 cut reduction in the increase was absorbed without cutting services. A comment was made about why I attacked the Fire Commission. About 5 or 6 budget seasons ago, the chief came to the Board of Finance and requested 16 new firefighters, which was a 50% increase in his staffing. 50%, an unheard of request. I served on the Board of Finance in the 80s, late 80s, never had we seen, and I've been following Board of Finance meetings for a very long time. And so that inspired me to do a lot of research. And in fact, the chairman of the Fire Commission had commended me many times when I would go there to learn and to ask questions for my efforts in researching and learning about the fire department. We have had 10 new firefighters the past 5 years through a phase-in process. Phase-in of hiring is very common in municipal budgeting. And it's very difficult to hire all at once. So yeah, it took a few years, but there was a phase-in of hiring 10 new firefighters. None were requested this year, and now for tonight I'm learning for the first time about this safer grant. We'll hear more about that in the future, I'm sure. But I also am very interested in this discussion about liability issue with the inspectors. I did have a problem, if you watch the Board of Finance meeting, with the part-time inspector. The chief at the, in this budget season, that we're going on right now, a couple of months ago, had asked for $50,000 on that consultant line. Now I understand it may be changed to an employee, which is fine. But he specifically asked for $50,000 for the part-time position, saying that this funding, I'm quoting, will allow for an additional part-time fire inspector. But lo and behold, he had already been hired. And when I questioned the chairman of the Board of Finance about how he felt about this position being filled before the funding was approved, Mr. Doheny, the Board of Finance chairman, responded immediately, "I'm not crazy about it." So, you know, the fire department gets a lot of leeway all the time, some of which I don't understand. But I'm very concerned about this liability issue, and we'll have to see how that pans out. Now, if they become regular, if both the full-time and the part-time become regular employees, will they be getting all of the benefits that go with it, or do they already have benefits?
There will be no health insurance benefits with it, Sally.
Okay.
It's a transfer of dollars from one designation to another designation. In this case, part-time employee, full-time employee.
Okay, but they'll become employees, they'll get W-2s rather than 1099s. So the only increase will be the Social Security tax that we'll have to pay. So they're not, you said no medical benefits and no pension benefits.
Well,
this isn't really pertinent to this particular budget, but it came up in the discussion, so I'm just trying to educate myself.
so on the full-time employee, this is a very well-respected fire marshal known in the region, a very prominent he retired from another agency, so there's no health insurance benefits. He will just collect a salary from us. Now, on the part-time person, he has retired from the town fire department, so yes, he's getting a pension, but we have to very carefully navigate through the IRS rules and regulations about the number of hours that a person like that can work, and that is something that we're managing right now. So there are no associated benefits other than what his retirement benefits are, and whether it's 18 hours a week or whatever it may be, it's just strictly a hourly rate on those hours that the person works.
All right, well, it seems like a reasonable solution to the liability issue. As far as other insurances, when it was just the one full-time consultant, which it has been since October of 2016, I had always asked the late Mr. Swinkowski, our former finance director, because that consultant drove a town car, wore a uniform. I mean, he inspected my place of business, so I saw him. And I always inquired about, is he covered? And he said, oh yeah, no problem. But I think he was thinking more about workers' comp and liability with the car. But this is the liability issue that has come to play, is liability for the actual inspections themselves.
So,
Okay.
yes. So,
Well, I always thought they were covered.
yeah, we discovered they were not. So, when we look at inspections, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just, as I mentioned earlier, the state mandate that we have to do, but when you have a lot of economic development, there are a lot of plan reviews that the fire marshals have to do. I'll give you an example. A&M Brown's Bakery, the bakery that I mentioned earlier. So we had both of our fire marshals, the full-timer and the part-timer, who were there discussing with the owner. I orchestrated the meeting, put everything together, brought the people in from New York, and so what we did was in one meeting, we made it simple for the business to come in large part to the dialogue back and forth between the fire marshals and the people who are going to be building and responsible for retrofitting the building. So when we think of inspections, think of it twofold. Plan reviews for new businesses coming in to ensure that the plans are safe and the compliance with the state statute that we referenced earlier.
Right, the 140 statute where we have to inspect existing businesses, right. They're two separate and distinct. I just want to make one thing also perfectly clear. I wasn't happy about the part-timer being hired prior to the funding being approved, but I did support that budgetary request. I said that publicly at a fire commission meeting and at a board of finance meeting. I supported the funding for that additional inspector. So no, I'm not always against the fire department, and I've always supported all of their apparatus purchases. But I did support that funding for that part-timer, but I did not, and I don't think Mr. Donahue supported that it was funded before you all voted on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, sir.
I just want to come up to give a little bit more support for the fire department, specifically the span of command, so recognizing the 4 lieutenants and also for the Jaws of Life. So thank you.
And just for the record, your name? Scott Friedman.
Scott Friedman, 17 Cooper Road.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Comments, questions, concerns? Now is your chance. Seeing no hands, you're looking really hard. I don't see anyone's hands. Then this will conclude the public hearing on the proposed budget. Thank you very much for attending, and please be sure to keep abreast of everything that continues forward and to attend the annual town budget meeting. Have a good night.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.